Padel clearly has evolved. It's evolved to faster points, shorter points, as we previously said. I would like to see some very slow courts incorporated into the calendar and maybe very slow balls so that literally points practically can't be won with smashes.
I think one of the key things about this sort of just understanding where they're going to go is sort of their game. And we know how offensive the game is nowadays. And you've got Arroyo, who can finish the points so easily. He's an example. If I look at Sanyo and Maxi, I just almost feel like there's just such a ceiling to their game. They're very much dependent as well on how John really plays. So if he's having one of those really inspiring games and he's on fire, then they could really just challenge anyone. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Padel Pod, your weekly podcast covering professional padel, presented by Hugo and Gons. We're on to episode 50, and as always, joined by my co-host Hugo. It's great to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Gons. Yeah, I just finished playing a padel match and we won. It wasn't the best of matches, but we made it. We got through the tough times. We were down a break in the second set and we turned it round and won 2 sets to love. So can't complain. It's always nice to finish the week with a big win, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm glad one of us did have a good weekend of padel, because mine certainly wasn't. But I'm not going to go into it. I'm going to instead focus on the future and getting back to good results. But yeah, nonetheless, it's great to hear that you've had a good result, and sometimes you're not feeling your best on court, but still managed to win is obviously, it's great.
It helps so much, doesn't it? Particularly when you're not feeling your best, you don't have that feeling that you're like really loose and that you can play those risky shots. When you go away with the win, I think mentally it's really important, because the next match, indirectly or directly, you'll just be a little bit more loose, a little bit more confident. And we know how important and how mental padel is as a sport. So yeah, good. But don't worry, mate. You're obviously in Madrid next week for a few days. So yeah, can't wait to be back on court together.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. I'm very much looking forward to it. And yeah, can you believe it? We're on to episode 50 now.
It's a hell of a number, isn't it? 50.
Yeah.
No, I to be honest, I can't, but I just love doing it. I just have so much fun. And well, I hope our listeners do as well. That's obviously incredibly important for us and to us. But to be honest, we only started this as two mates who wanted to chat a bit at padel and hopefully, yeah, maybe attract some interest, but mainly for our own enjoyment. So I've definitely achieved that. I don't know what you think, Gons.
Yeah, same for me. It's incredible to be able to talk about padel in this sort of forum every day with you. And yeah, I hope that our listeners as well, our audience, and enjoy what we've got to say. We're by no means professionals of this, and like, we just love chatting about it and watching the game. We love playing it, we love watching it, we love everything around it. But yeah, maybe we should get started with the episode as such, because if not, we're probably going to bore our audience being a bit soppy around here.
100%. Yeah, let's kick off. And actually, I just wanted to kick off the episode with a little nugget of news. I just read that Coqui Nieto and John Sanz won't be playing the Paraguay P2, if I'm not mistaken. The reason isn't very clear. At least I haven't read why. I hope everything's okay with both of them. But yeah, a bit of a surprise, to be honest, and a bit of a shame.
Yeah, a bit of a shame, because, and obviously hope that it's like nothing serious, no personal or injury. So really hoping that, yeah, it's just something that's maybe like a one-off, but I'm sure that they'll be gutted not to play, because they did sort of have a really shocking performance in the last tournament in Sevilla. They lost against Augsburger and Libak, which I think in a way, everyone can really lose to them, because they do have that quality. But I just felt like the way they lost that match was tough to watch. Like, you could really see them out of sorts, and they were never really concentrated, never really on the match. So I'm sure that they were so much looking forward to the next chance that they got to compete, to be able to put wrongs into rights. So yeah, a bit of shocking news, and yeah, such a shame to see one of the top pairs not be able to compete.
Could it maybe mean that they're considering calling quits and looking for new partners?
Well, let's see, but it's an interesting question. I think we've discussed it, and I'm sure that they are sort of it will go into our next topic, so maybe we should leave our thoughts for that. But initially, we wanted to talk about Jorge Martínez, the coach and sort of the leading figure of the M3 Academy, which is based in Madrid and that trains namely Ale Galán and Chingotto now, and also on the women's side, Delphi and Brea González. And he's had the opportunity this week to talk to Mejora tu Padel, part of the sort of I guess work that Isaias is doing as part of 2010 and Mejora tu Padel with Manu Martín. So they had the chance to interview Jorge Martínez, and yeah, it was great to hear one of the leading coaches, if not the best coach out there, speak about the game. And yeah, can I just maybe give him a massive shout out for the start of the year that he's had? I mean, the guy just loves working on a Sunday. Like it's unbelievable. In the last couple of tournaments, Chingotto and Galán and Delphi and Bea González have like absolutely smashed it. They've won all tournaments. The last two, I believe, and I believe Delphi also and Bea also won Puerto Cabello. So honestly, just an unbelievable record that they've had so far. So yeah, massive shout out to him.
Yeah, absolutely. He's had a hell of a couple of weeks, and well, he must have really enjoyed. I think obviously he must be loving life, his new life with Chingotto and Galán, Chingalan, probably the people's favorite pair at the moment, the new favorite pair that everyone loves because they're both well, they kind of we can see how in sync they are on the court, and they're also both very nice guys. Chingotto in particular is just like everyone loves him. But I was just going to say he must have really enjoyed being on the bench to watch Delphi and Bea come back from a 5-love down when they were playing Salazar and Ricardo. And they managed to get 7 games in a row and win that third set 7-5, and then go on to the final and smash the number ones, Ari Sanchez and Paula Jose Maria 6-1, 6-1, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that performance in particular, he must have really, really enjoyed, and he must have loved seeing his disciples or his students, his players come back and really show that strength mentally. So yeah, he is one of the greats, undoubtedly. I think he's everyone when players and pundits and when they talk about the top coaches, they always mention his name, and we know how well M3 are doing as an academy. They obviously recently had Juan Lebron when he was playing with Ale Galán. So yeah, it was a really interesting interview, and even though it was only about 20 minutes long, there were so many different kind of nuggets and little gems that he left us. I don't know whether there's one in particular, Gons, that you wanted to kick off with.
Yeah, maybe we can start about the changing the game. He gets asked if he feels that the game has changed a lot, because Jorge Martinez is actually one of the coaches that's just been around forever, so he's sort of seen like every phase of the game. And I thought that it was really interesting. He basically attributed that he does think that there's a change in the game, and he basically attributed it to three things, but one of them being on top of the other two. So the sort of lesser drivers of this change in the game of towards a faster game, he said, are the materials. So just the rackets being a lot better, a lot faster, a lot more powerful, giving the players essentially the ability to do more with them. Then the other one is court conditions. So he also mentioned that courts are just better built, and they've improved, so it allows players again to really try different things. They're faster as well. But then the main one that he said was just really taking a player's attributes and understanding that player's attributes and seeing if they can do something more. So he's given the example of Galán and Lebron, which are the main players that he's worked with initially. And to be fair, Galán and Lebron, I do think, are seen as sort of the sort of starters of this new era of paddle. And he mentioned how, for example, if you have a player with Galán's sort of just innate capability and physical strength, and how fast he is, of really being able to then take that sort of, I guess, characteristic of him or attribute of him and be like, well, why don't we make the game faster? Why don't we given that you've already got this space, why don't we just take the time off the opponents and do things a bit differently? Just push the boundaries. Because then what then that does is other players have to either create something different and create something new to combat that, or they have to get to that level. So I thought that was quite interesting. And yeah, I would love to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that part of the interview. We've obviously discussed quite often that we think that Padel has evolved. And even though we didn't live through the early years of Padel, because realistically, we've only really been following it closely for the last, well, very closely for the last few years, but well, following it for the last maybe 6 years, maybe a little bit more. And maybe for us, it's not as obvious to well, just how much Padel is evolving, because we've basically, I remember Lebron and Paquito being the number ones, but not loads. And then obviously we had that dominance from Galán and Lebron playing this unbelievably fast Padel. And now recently we've had Coyo and Tapia who've taken it to another level. So we have seen how it's evolved and how it's become. Basically, players are just trying to shorten the points as much as possible because, as you said, because the rackets are faster, because the balls are faster, because the courts are better, they're able to do it. They just trust their capabilities. And perhaps when I've watched previous tournaments, I haven't done it loads, but to tournaments, say 10, 12 years ago, I remember watching Sanyo Gutierrez and I'm forgetting, sorry, Seba Nerone playing in a Granada Open like 10 or 12 years ago. And the Padel really was different. You could see that the ball wasn't as fast. You could see that the players couldn't smash as much because when they did and they didn't smash well, it was easier for the opponents to basically play a counter attack and put the ball out por cuadro or just win the point at the net. So it clearly has evolved, and well, at least we think so. I think so, and it's interesting to hear that Jorge does as well, because if I'm not mistaken, I think we talked about an interview probably a few episodes ago now, quite a few episodes ago. I can't remember whether it was Sanyo Gutierrez or someone else who said that he didn't think that Padel had actually changed that much. Do you remember when we talked about that, Gons?
Oof, I think you've caught me here, to be
It
honest.
it just rings a bell. I have a feeling that someone said, no, I think it's similar. It's just,
It does ring a bell, actually.
yeah. But anyway, I totally agree with Jorge. It's obvious that, say for him, he was talking about specifically about Ale Galán. If Ale Galán can play really fast Padel, they have to take advantage of it, because obviously that's going to influence other pairs. And if you can reduce the time that other players have to play a shot, then obviously much better. And he also said that obviously that makes other players have to change their game and have to adapt to this new style of play. So I mean, I think we're already seeing it. We're seeing Estupan Dineno, the basically the they've always been or traditionally been players who just put that extra ball in, and they're probably slightly more defensive, or definitely more defensive than other top pairs, say Goyan Tapia, Lebron and Galán, etc. And now they've changed their game completely. And we're seeing Dineno go for smashes and be super attacking. So I think Paddle clearly has evolved. It's evolved to faster points, shorter points, as we previously said. And everyone, or at least all the top pairs, are trying to do that. So yeah, I definitely agree with him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what's sort of the next step after that. They do mention, and he does mention actually as well, what we've discussed in the past in terms of switch play with Mardita, which that's probably, do you think that's probably the sort of next level where the game's going to go next?
I definitely think so. I mean, he already said that switch play is happening very frequently now as players try to take advantage of. Say you're at the net and you know that the ball that. So yeah, the player who's receiving the ball that you previously played is going to play. Well, not to you if you're at the net. You're obviously going to try and, or players may try and take advantage and move into the other side of the court and play a quick volley, maybe a drop shot or a fast shot, go for a smash. So it makes total sense from a tactical point of view. And I think we're already seeing it. I mean, we've seen how Lebron and Paquito are doing it very consistently, even though I wouldn't say that it's been super productive for them yet. And I'll tell you what, actually watching Chingotto and Galán, I've seen it happen quite often. And I'm actually quite surprised, because you would think that Chingotto, just the classic forehand player, you don't want him anywhere near the backhand because he's not tall, he's not aggressive, etc. And Galán, the opposite. But I guess Galán is just so good anywhere that obviously he can play on the forehand. And given that Chingotto is so good when he's tight to the net, then it makes sense for him to try and take advantage of that forward position. So yeah, we're definitely seeing it happen more and more often. And yeah, I think that could be kind of an evolution of the game. What I would love to see, and what we've briefly talked about in previous episodes, is I would like to see some very slow courts incorporated into the calendar, and maybe very slow balls, so that literally points practically can't be won with smashes, at least with smashes really far back in the court, because I think not only would that make players improve, but it would be really interesting from a spectator point of view, because you learn a lot about the game and what you have to do and what players can do when they can't win the point within 3 shots. So I would love to see that. And I know we do, and players are talking that some courts are slower, some courts are faster, but it feels like players today, and the top players today, are able to smash from pretty much anywhere on the court. So I would like to see, well, organizers, Premier Padel, and any other major tournament and tours make a really active effort to make some really, really slow courts and see what happens.
Yeah, that'd be great. Actually, I'd love to see that as well. I think it'd be so interesting, and you'd then be able to really see like who's essentially the best all round, or if you've got like specific players that are just really good with certain type of conditions. But yeah, that's a really interesting one. I definitely would love to see that in the future at some point. But maybe the next thing that I thought was quite interesting was he talked about stats as well. Stats, I think, have become massive, massive for us as well. Big shout out to Padel Intelligence. We love Vianney's stats, and we use them quite a bit. I think it just brings us that bit of extra insight into the game. But yeah, it's very interesting what he had to say about stats. I think he was very, he wasn't, he didn't necessarily not like stats, but he was just like, I guess, throwing a bit of caution around stats, which is very true. You do have to essentially take everything with a pinch of salt, in terms of you need to contextualize the data, right? You can't just be told a certain, I don't know, Galán has X amount of winners and then be able to draw many conclusions from that. Firstly, you need to contextualize. Each match is different. Each situation is different. And then the other bit as well, which was interesting and also very true, is that you need to have a large sample size. So you can't just judge based on one match or one tournament. You need to have that sort of infrastructure to understand really where the mean is, right? Because if you, I think he used an example, if they told him Galán had, I don't know, 28 winners in a match, then he doesn't know, is that good, is that bad? Because if your average across like the whole season or something like that is 50, then it's terrible. But if it's 10, then it's amazing. So it really is just, data and stats are great. And now we're seeing them a lot in paddle, which I think is amazing. But we do need to, one, contextualize and understand what's happening in the game alongside the data and what it's telling us. And two, really maybe just have a bit of a bigger sample size, which will be developed, I'm sure, this year, to really then understand like performance and against those benchmarks, essentially. Because in some cases you do have like players with ridiculous stats, and then you're like, well, how come is that not really translated to performance on court? And then it's maybe because it's just like a very small sample size, like they don't, it's not happening recurringly. So yeah, very interesting to hear his opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think he was being a bit harsh on that stat regarding Galán. I think if you know that he's produced 28 winners and 4 unforced errors, I think you have an idea that he's played a pretty good match.
Yeah.
But I do totally agree with what he says. Obviously, if he's producing more winners, if they look at the average and all other tournaments are 30, 35, 40, and he's produced 28, then actually, funnily enough, it wouldn't be a great stat. But yeah, I think what was also quite interesting is that he said that they'd already been working, when LeBron and Galán were a pair, they'd been working with a statistics provider, a paddle data provider for some time, and that now M3, the academy, had invested in a separate department, which is basically they're gonna have their own in-house data and statistics team. So they've hired a stat man, basically a stat guru, who's going to be running it. And what he did say is that obviously they'll only really be able to have accurate data, as per se, in about a year, because that's when you have a big enough sample size. But really interesting that, well, they've actually called that team M3 Lab, which is which I thought was quite funny, and it sounds quite geeky, but it makes total sense. I think I think as fans, it's great that we actually finally have, as we've mentioned loads of times throughout our chats, it's great that we finally have access to data, because I remember when I started watching Padel, I didn't know how many winners players were producing. I was just going off feelings and thoughts when I was watching matches. I was like, oh, Galán played so well today. He won so many points. But I couldn't have the raw data, the actual numbers. So I do really enjoy it. But it is true that you've got to put them into context, and that obviously, as you said, you need a big enough sample size to really be able to believe these stats and give them proper value. And actually, I read something really interesting online. It's a slightly separate topic, but also going back to stats. I was reading what happens when a player goes for a smash, say Galán, and the ball bounces and it bounces really high, and it's obvious that it's going to be a winner. How many times you see the opposition player just hit the net with the bat, because almost in frustration? Do you know what I mean when that happens? So when say Galán goes for a smash and Stupa sees that the ball's going too high and he just smacks the net.
Yeah.
So, funnily enough, is that a winner, or is that because actually they could attribute the point to net touch, as per se, and take that winner away from Galán. And funnily enough, if that happened a lot of times throughout the match, it could really affect the stats. From what I've been reading and from what people have said in chats, etc., it seems like, companies that look at stats, for example, Padel Intelligence, but also Padel Up, etc., don't take that as a net touch. They obviously take it as a winner because they can see that it's a winner. But hey, that would be one way to really basically put down your opponent and other players that you're playing against.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's I think it would be a bit harsh if they didn't grant that as a winner. I think I'm pretty sure like players like Tapia or Alan would be very mad if that happened. But because they're clearly pulling out like some crazy smash, bringing it so high that no one can reach, and then the other player touches the net, because it does happen actually quite a bit. It's
so many times.
Yeah, it's quite funny. But yeah, I am glad that these sort of stats providers definitely award the player in that regard.
Yeah, it'd be a joke if it didn't happen. I just see Goya, for example, do it a lot, and yeah, I guess it's good that they're taking it into account. Sorry, but actually, one topic that I really did want to discuss regarding Jorge Martínez's interview is that he basically says that the big kind of idea around the M3 Academy and their main philosophy is, or one of their main philosophies is, that paddle is a team sport. And I'd love to get your thoughts on it, because some days I think it's an individual sport. Other days I think it's a team sport. Now, personally, I think that you do have to view it as a team sport, because if the team doesn't play well, it's very hard for you and your pair to win. Because at the end of the day, even if you're playing a fantastic match or if you're really good, but if your partner is not playing well, the other pair can just play him the big majority of the balls, keep the ball away from you, and win the match, regardless of how well you're playing. So, yeah, I just want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think on court, it's definitely a team sport. I think it's an individual sport is almost alluded to off court and your own personal decisions that you take if you want to switch partner or not. But I definitely agree that on court, it's a team sport. I mean, we've seen, and definitely at the professional level, when both players need to play well to win a match. Like you could have one player being stellar and the other still being good and maybe not contributing as much, but contributing positively, that you still win. We've seen, for example, the first win of Chingotto and Galán against Coya and Tapia, where Coya played really well. His contribution score was really good. Tapia's wasn't. They lost. So it's definitely a team sport on court. I 100% agree with that. And especially at the professional level, I don't think that at the professional level you can have, because the players are just so good, all of them. So I don't think that you can have one player, let's say, being really, really good and the other playing the teammate essentially being really, really bad and winning a match. Or it'll be quite, if the opposition is obviously, let's say, not as good as a good player, but not as bad, and they're still positive. Like I just don't see it happening. I do think that at amateur level, you can definitely have one player that is stellar and the other player maybe isn't as great, and you can still win the match. But yeah, I definitely agree at a professional level, it's definitely a team sport.
Yeah, and I think actually it's really important for people and, well, amateurs and fans and players to view it as a team sport, because it's really easy to think, hey, if I improve these aspects of my game, sorry, and I play well, I'm going to be doing better. And I'm sure that is the case in a way. Obviously, you've got to work on your own game and your own shots, etc. But at the end of the day, I think, and as I actually mentioned towards the start of this episode, given that paddle is such a mental sport, you need to have that team atmosphere with your pair, and you need to be supportive and you need to be helpful. And you got to think, well, even literally going back to the basics of, if I play a shot that I'm taking the risk and I leave a really easy shot for the other player to just put it past my teammate, I could be really selfish and think, my teammate could have done it better. But no, it's your mistake. So that's why playing for the team is so important. Now, it's really interesting to see that, and it makes total sense that the top pairs in paddle are, well, just work completely in sync. Now, why are the Super Pibes doing so well? Yes, they're fantastic players, but you can literally see their synergy on the court. They just leave no gaps between them because they know each other so well, because they know what the other players going to be doing, and they really back each other, and you can see them like kind of edging each other on. And well, when one makes a mistake, the other one's really kind of trying to be positive and pick the other player up. And I think I'm using, well, still Bandinino as an example. There's the big majority of pairs do that, but I think they are the perfect example of how paddle has to be played in terms of thinking that you and your partner are a team. That's the way you're going to achieve. That's the way you're going to improve the most, I think.
Yeah, and also something you mentioned related to this whole team thing is the fact that you can't play the same depending who you have to adjust your game depending who you're playing with. You've got to understand your partner's characteristics. You've got to understand your own attributes and what you can offer, and then you got to play a brand of paddle that can essentially give you the best outcome. So it is 100% a team sport, because you can't just expect to be playing the exact same way every single time. You have to adjust your game slightly to who you're playing with. So yeah, it's 100% team sport. Now off the court, I don't disagree that it's more you sort of look after yourself and what's best for your career and all of that, especially at this stage where paddle is just really starting to become a lot more professionalized, and seedings are so important and all these things. Maybe in the future it doesn't become as sort of like drastic as it is right now in terms of like changes and stuff like that. But yeah, in terms of being the whole team element, I 100% agree with Jorge there.
But even off the court, to be honest, and I'm just thinking about that right now, even off the court, say that you're playing with a partner, it's really important to, I think, probably create a bond off the court and do things beyond
Yeah.
playing paddle, because you got to, well, build some sort of relationship. It doesn't have to be a friendship, but a relationship based on trust and respect. And I think you see a lot of amateur players in paddle. At least I've faced a lot of pairs where you can just see that one or even both of them don't play as a pair, don't play as a team, and it completely lets them down, even if they're really good individually. Even if both players, funnily enough, are really good individually. Even, I mean, Gonz, I'm sure you can remember a couple of matches when you and I, obviously, we know each other well, and I think we play as a team and we make an effort to work well as a pair and improve together. We play players that individually are better than us, but because they don't play together, because they don't play as a team, we end up beating them. So yeah, I think it was a really interesting topic to, well, just to discuss, and would be great to get our fans' views on it. If they leave a comment on YouTube or wherever they want on our social media, it'd be great to hear what they think. Is paddle more of a team sport, or is it more of an individual sport?
Yeah, really, really interesting. I'd love to hear what people have to say about that. But maybe moving on to our last topic, unless there's anything that you'd want to continue to discuss around the Jorge Martinez interview.
No, to be honest, I think we took more than 20 minutes to discuss an interview that was less than 20 minutes. So I think we probably maxed it out.
Yeah, yeah, that is very true. But then moving on, the sort of last topic that we wanted to talk about was just a bit about the sort of what we call best of the rest pairs. I think it's been quite clear now that there are four pairs that are just really above all the main players, or all the players, sorry, Premier Padel. And I think that we've talked about them enough. So maybe we wanted to use this opportunity, given that there hasn't been any sort of paddle this week, to really talk about the sort of rest of the tour, because there's still some interesting fights going on, and some very competitive paddle, I think, and we'll see how this year goes for these pairs, because I think it'll be very determinant for some of them in terms of then what do they do next and what they can aspire to. But yeah, we would love to sort of give our thoughts and sort of some of these of who we think, like the pairs that we think are essentially going to be really maybe that best of the rest, or challenging for that, I would say, fifth spot essentially. So maybe we can start with, well, I'm gonna name. How about we do this? I'm gonna name the ones that I think are in the hunt, basically,
Okay.
and then maybe we can like digest some of them and give our opinions of which one we think is the best.
Sounds
So
great.
I think the first one is quite obvious, Garrido and Yanguas. I mean, they are just had an amazing start to the season. Yanguas is honestly in both of our top most informed players so far, and arguably the most improved player of the year. So and they are the sixth seed, if I'm not mistaken. So they're like
So,
yeah, they're basically there. Then the next one, because they're the fifth seed already, so I guess they do have a chance, is Tello and Bela, who've recently joined. They did have their debut last in Sevilla, but yeah, a bit of questions there, I guess, around Bela and his availability. Then we've got Momo and Ruiz, who also had their sort of recent re-debut because they were together. And then we've got Sanyo and Maxi. And if I'm not mistaken, these ones are in order. So Tello Bela fifth, Garrido Yanguas seventh, Momo Ruiz eighth, I believe, and then Sanyo Maxi as well, and then Koki and John, obviously as well, quite in the hunt. Since they've been together, they've been very successful. And then this is my sort of like, I guess, surprise one, which I do think have a chance just because they've been playing so well. And
Okay.
and I believe in them. Now, in terms of points, it's potentially a bit unrealistic, but just hear me out. I think Arroyo and Alonso, as a bit of a curveball, I'm going to throw them out there because I do really like them, and they've had like incredible results so far this year. So yeah, what do you think? First of all, do you agree that you would say those are more or less the sort of pairs that you would say are in the hunt? Would you add anyone else? Do you think I've missed someone?
No, I definitely agree. Funnily enough, Arroyo and Alonso were my outside shout, or one of
Oh,
my outside shouts. I mean, they've made the quarterfinals more often than not this season, if I'm not mistaken. They're playing so well, and they almost beat the Super Pibes, Stupandineno, in Seville. I mean, that match was 6-4, 4-6, 6-4, and they had a break point in the third set, if I'm not mistaken, to be serving for the match. So they've been sensational. But yeah, I totally agree. I think even though they haven't had a great start to the season, potentially we could mention Victor Ruiz and Lucas Bergamini. I think they played really well last season. They haven't been playing that well this season, or at least the results haven't gone their way. But it could be a bit of an outside shout, and maybe two others. Well, I've got a few names jotted down, a few pairs. I don't know whether you'd agree. Pablo Cardona and Javi Ruiz, because they won both Ultimate Paddle Tours both Ultimate Paddle Tour tournaments this season, and we've seen how they have challenged some of the top pairs. I love Javi Leal. I think he's an unbelievable player. So I think he will fare really well. The problem is that his partner Lucas Campagnolo has struggled a lot with injuries, and I don't know whether he's at the same level as Leal. I'm not 100% sure, but they still could cause a few upsets throughout the season. And then the last one, Tino Libac and Leo Asburger. They obviously, in terms of rankings, they're very far away. But now that we're starting with the South American tour, 3 tournaments in a row played in South America, I think they're going to be really up for them, and they could cause a lot of upsets. So, so going back to the question, now, are we thinking who do we think will finish 5th looking at the points? Or are we thinking who will have the best season out of the rest? Because obviously that's a massive difference.
yeah,
Because
I agree.
it's a
I,
totally different question.
I think to make it more interesting, let's just go with who do we think it's going to be is essentially going to finish best. Let's sort of take the points out of it.
Okay, so who's going to have the best season?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, to be honest, if I had to bet my house on it right now, Young Wasan Garrido. Are we including them in the question, or are we going for someone else?
Yeah, let's exclude them because they're just they're potentially already there, and it's sort of they're sort of in the league of their own because they're not like the top 4 quite, but they're also just so far above everyone else.
Yeah, so, okay, I would go for 2. I would go for Arroyo and Alonso. I think they're my outsider shout. I think they're doing really well. I think they mix really well because they're literally almost like the perfect. Edu Alonso is the standard forehand player. Very few unforced errors, good bandeja, consistent, etc. And then you've got Alejandro Arroyo, who's just a machine, a smashing machine, an overhead shot machine, is Biboras. We saw the stat regarding he's the player, at least before the end of the last tournament in Seville. I think he was the player that had produced the most winners with overhead shots. So Biboras, bandejas, and smashes ahead of even Galán. So I think that just shows how well they work in sync, and I think they're going to do really well. The other one is a really tough one. I'm going to go for Momo González and Alex Ruiz. I'm going to give them my vote of confidence because they played really well together when they were previously teamed up. I do have a concern regarding Alex Ruiz's form for some time hasn't been great, and he's just come back from injury. His confidence has probably been knocked a little bit because he hasn't done as well as he thought he could do with Juan Tello. And again, Momo is probably in a similar situation where his level hasn't been what everyone else expected it to be for a number of months now, and he's had to change pairs a lot. So I just don't know. But when I look at the other pairs, I don't really trust them to be that consistent. And I do see Momo and Alex being consistent. Now, the only reason I don't go for Cocky and John is because I genuinely think that they might split sometime soon. I just have a feeling that Cocky Nieto is having maybe the season of his life. He's playing so well. And John Sant so far has not really managed to kick off his season. I definitely think he's dropped his level when you look at his level towards the end of last season and throughout last year and the beginning of this season. And we're already in May. So I just don't know. If they lasted until the end of the year, then they'd definitely be in the question. Now, are they going to last? I'm not sure.
Yeah, to throw it back to you then to what you normally tell me, who do they go with?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to think. It
Because
really is hard. Now, say Sanyo and Maxi don't do that well, right? Say Sanyo suddenly says, I'm going to go with Coqui Nieto. Coqui Nieto's in the form of his life, and Coqui Nieto would say, hey, I'm going to play with Sanyo Gutierrez, one of the legends of the game. I could see that happening. And funnily enough, I don't think it will, but we've seen that Yanguas Garrido have had a recent issue regarding potentially Yanguas's attitude when he was playing in Seville. Garrido wasn't very happy with, well, yeah, what Yanguas was saying and how he was, well, his body language on the court. Now, they're doing really, really well right now, but who knows what could happen over the next few months. So could that suddenly change the question? I just don't know. Even say Lebron and Paquito stop. They say they don't challenge for what they think they should be challenging for, and their heads get the better of them. I could definitely see Paquito and Yanguas being a hell of a pair.
that one for sure. I do think that thing is if Koki and John split, I almost feel like that sort of middle tier, all these pairs that we've discussed, I think it will be, yeah, there will be another shuffle essentially because given how important seeding is, I just don't see either of them sort of taking a punt on like a really young sort
Agreed.
of young player like I was Burger or something like that. So at least for now. So yeah. So then that sort of essentially gets me to the point. It's like, are they really going to split? But who knows? I mean, if then, as you say, like Paquito and Lebron or something like that, like for whatever reason, they do end up splitting, then potentially like that just can cause a whole sort of domino effect. But maybe going back to the question, I think to me, I'm gonna go with. I do think Arroyo and Alonso. I think actually as well. I would agree. I think. I mean, they've been playing really well. You sort of highlighted some of their key strengths. I also think so. They're now being coached by Manu Martin, and we know how like good he is from a paddle perspective. I'm not sure if he's sort of coaching in the coaching staff of Coelho and Tapia anymore, but he was.
He is coaching
So
Goyo, so
he's
he's very
still,
much involved
yeah,
with him, and his coaching team are very much involved with Goyo on a day-to-day basis.
yeah. So you essentially can just tell the pedigree of a coach that he is, the fact that he's in the coaching staff of Arturo Coelho, the current world number one. So yeah, and that we've seen massive improvements from them. And they've definitely, for me, I think one of the key things about this sort of just understanding where they're going to go is sort of their game. And we know how offensive the game is nowadays. And you've got Arroyo who can finish the points so easily. He's been in the top of percentage of winners in the past and sort of throughout this season. If I'm not mistaken, throughout the first four tournaments when we looked at the most informed players, he was the player with the best sort of the most amount of smash winners as well. So in terms of like how the game is evolving, where it is right now, I think you've got two players that are both young and they've got the attributes. Whereas, for example, if I look at Sanyo and Maxi, I just almost feel like there's just such a ceiling to their game. So I feel like Arroyo and Alonso can definitely jump that and have like a really good season. Now for my next one, for me it would be Koki and John. Uh, and I'm assuming that they're sort of sticking together, and I do believe that they'll sort of stick together. But they've had like quite a okay start to the season. Like I think
Yeah.
they're also a bit of a, I guess, just because of their own success. Like we've held them at their expectations, but last year they've had an incredible run since they sort of stuck together. Always there in terms of quarterfinals, even semifinals, and this year they beat Paquito and Lebron, made the semifinals. So I still feel like they're very much dependent as well on how John really plays. So if he's having one of those really inspiring games and he's on fire, then they could really just challenge anyone. Whereas if he is sort of in a, I guess, not in a good mental state or a bit more unfocused, then we can have results like we had in sort of the last tournament in Sevilla. But I think those for me are sort of the sort of favorites, I would say. Now, Momo and Ruiz, very interesting. They did have a decent debut. I thought they did lose to Paquito and Lebron, which is completely fair. They made a quarterfinals, so fair, like they were in the best 8 pairs and they are in that ranking. So it's not like they didn't perform badly. I just feel like, again, similar to what I've sort of said about Sanya Maxi, I just feel like there's a ceiling to the game, especially nowadays. And Ruiz, for me, when he was playing his first time with Momo, like, it was unbelievable. It was almost like sort of the best time of his career. And now he just seems like he's not really like there. And a lot of like unforced errors. I feel like he also doesn't generate just enough winners. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Maybe the sort of playing style of Momo will suit him really well, and then they will give him a lot more confidence and sort of the results that he needs. I'm sure that when he played with Teo, that sort of brought him down a bit, if you see what I mean, because they didn't perform as one would expect.
I tell you what, funnily enough, because you were talking about Momo González and Alex Ruiz right now, if the question was, who do I think will finish, maybe not 5th seeded, because if I had to bet, as I say, I would say Yanguas Garrido, but 6th seeded, I would go for Momo and Alex. And I tell you why. I think they're the pair that's least unlikely to split out of all the others, because I think they've just got back together. They get on really well. Their recent interview with Isaías Blayota in Mejora tu Padel en 2010, they were talking about how much they've kind of missed each other on court and how well they fared when they were playing together, how they work really well in sync, how their game styles suit. I just don't see them splitting. And we've seen how key it is to not split within those kind of, when you're looking at what ranking you want to achieve as a pair at the end of the year. Because funnily enough, who was the 5th seeded pair at the end of last season? If I'm not mistaken, it was Teo and Ruiz, who we've said didn't perform to expectations, and they still stuck to their 5th seed and their 5th. They were the 5th ranked pair. So if the question was, who do I think will finish ranked? Well, will finish 6th, because as I say, Yanguas Garrido right now are a level above the rest, and I'd be surprised if they didn't maintain it. I would actually say Mo and Alex. Who would you go for?
Yeah, in terms of 6th seed, probably as well.
Nice.
No hope for Dejan Bella.
You're asking the wrong man. You should ask yourself, Gons.
Yeah.
You were very, very happy, and you were betting on them when they teamed up, and I don't see you doing that now, eh?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have their best day. Funnily enough, I actually thought Bella was okay-ish on the right for
Agreed.
being his first tournament. Now they didn't make the quarterfinals and they lost to Zapata or Enada, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And it still went 3 sets. So, but yeah, it does feel like a long way to go still. Bella still needs to be a bit more. He's not going to give a lot of winners, even though he was, funnily enough, smashing a lot, which I was a bit worried. I was a bit concerned about his his elbow, because like, what are you doing? Do you really just want to, like, do you just want to break it off completely? But anyway, I still feel like Teo just needs to give like a bit more, and I think the availability point is just going to be key. I'm just not sure how durable they're going to be. If I'm honest with you, if there is one pair that, out of the ones that we've just discussed, I'm like, these are definitely, like, who's splitting the first? I could just see Teo Bella splitting, to be honest.
Really? Now, I would say that, but I just have a feeling that given that they've just teamed up and we only have 6-7 months left, I don't really see, because Bela will probably try to finish his career with someone who can perform to some level. Obviously, Teo is a hell of a player, and even though he's not performing as well as we would expect him to be, I'm sure he'll pick up his form sooner rather than later. And I just think Teo, the reason, given that he's teamed up with Bela now, and he knows about his injuries and he knows that this is his last season, would you see him saying, okay, instead of staying 3 months with him, sorry, 6 or 7 months with him, I'll split in 3 months' time and go for someone else? I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. But I don't know why I have a feeling that they will stick together, just because for Teo, it's a hell of a learning experience and he'll never forget playing with his biggest idol. And for Bela, it's like Teo is, to be honest, probably the perfect partner he could have right now at this stage in his career.
Yeah, it's more like the injury risk basically. Because if Deo is like, I don't know, like if half of the tournaments he either doesn't play or has to play with someone else, then I just don't see how he's just gonna like essentially be wanting to sort of stick with that. But we'll see. I mean, I do have hope in them. I mean, they from a points perspective, they are like they've got an okayish margin,
They do.
but and I feel like if Deo is on point and he does get to his level, I definitely feel like they have a higher ceiling than Momo and Alex. But that sort of injury risk is really the thing that is sort of worrying me.
Yeah. And funnily enough, who would you say out of all the pairs that we've discussed, if you had to go just to finish the episode, because it's probably been going on for quite a bit of time, but who
Yeah.
would you say is going to have the most disappointing rest of the season out of all the pairs we discussed? Now, I'm not talking about ranking, just
Mm.
disappointing in terms of what we'd expect, what fans would expect, what they personally would expect.
Whew. It's a tough one. I I'm thinking to be fair, like funny enough, it could either be Teo and Bella or Sanyon Maxi. Um, just because like Teo and Bella, I feel like there is some sort of expectation. They are the fifth seed after all. Teo's out of the players that we've mentioned, like in the sort of group, even even including Garrido and Yanguas, like I'd argue, like I think you could make an argument that he's the best player out of all of them. Maybe not right now, but like he's got some baggage and
Yeah.
he's really really good. So I feel like it could. The thing for me is just it could either go really well or it can just go really bad. So that's why I think so. And then Sanyo and Maxi, yeah, I just don't see them at all really being that competitive. And to be fair, like there's still some expectations I think around Sanyo and that he's still sort of like really belonging to that top players. But I feel like this season is probably going to be a sort of wake up call for both of them in terms of like where they actually are and sort of yeah what they want to do in the future.
I'm actually probably going to go for a different one, and probably just because I don't have huge expectations on the Yobela and Sanyo Maxi partnerships, just personally on a personal level. I'd actually say Victor Ruiz and Lucas Bergamini. I think, given that they haven't started the season well, it's hard to turn that kind of their fortunes around. We've seen that happen maybe a little bit with, I'm forgetting their names now. I can't believe it. It's the Argentine player who plays on the left and the Spanish player plays on the right. I can't believe I've forgotten their names. It's
Sacher and
no,
Noria.
no, no, no. So it's more a classic pair who've played together for a long time, and we've traditionally said that we quite like them. But you know what? I'm just going to get it up very quickly because I can't believe I'm not remembering their names. It's the art. Let me just have a quick look. It's because I remember that not long ago we were saying, hey, these could be a pair to look at, and could they rise up the rankings? And now suddenly it seems like they've kind of lost it a bit, and it definitely feels like it's the case because I'm really having to scroll down to find their names on the FIP rankings now, unless I've totally missed them already. But
I'm trying to think here.
I can't believe I'm forgetting their names. This I really wasn't expecting this to. Sorry, Rami Moyano and Chisco Gil.
Oh
There you
right,
go.
yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember. I can't believe I was forgetting their names. They've suddenly completely kind of lost their form. They're really struggling to win games. And I at the end of the last season, I thought Victor Ruiz looked like a player that a lot of top players could be looking at in terms of when pair changes happen. Say Yanguas could have thought, hey, Victor Ruiz is an interesting option on the left-hand side. And then Bergamini was having a really good kind of, streak of matches and performances, but they've really lost it. And I was personally expecting them to be challenging for that top 8, and it doesn't really feel like they're doing that consistently.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to them, they've also been sort of riddled with injuries, and especially they've had to miss some of the start of the season. So now they are playing now, and actually their first match round is against Goyan Tapia. So that's yeah, going to be very tough. But yeah, exactly. But in neither case, one thing about them is that they do genuinely normally have really good second halves of the season.
True.
It happened last year and the previous year as well. So we'll see. But yeah, in terms of as players, I definitely do think Victor Ruiz offensively he's a really good player. He definitely has all the shots as well. But I mean, he's just your classic right-sided player who doesn't miss a ball and really consistent and really helps the team. So yeah, it's a good shout as well. But we should probably leave it at that, because at this point, I think we'll probably have no one listening, given how long we've gone. And I do love talking to you, Hugo, but yeah, not this much.
Particularly after my massive, I can't believe I can remember Chisco Gil and Rami Moyano. They just, the names have completely escaped my mind, because I was literally thinking of them, and I could remember them playing together and their playing styles and everything, but just the names I'd completely lost. So guys, fans, I really do apologize. And I still do like them as a pair, but yeah, I wanted to use them as an example. But anyway, guys, thank you so much. It's been a great episode, and obviously super, super happy that it's marked our 50th appearance on screen. Now, we're loving the interaction that we're starting to have. Well, it's obviously increasing a lot on YouTube and through our social accounts. So please keep posting your thoughts, any feedback you may have, etc. We're obviously we really like seeing it, and it really encourages us to keep going and keep improving.
100% echo what everything Hugo said. And yeah, I hope everyone tunes in to the P2 that we have this week, because Padel's back and Padel's now going to South America. So can't wait.
Cheers, guys.